Chinese didn't say it was faked. But
on account of the Russians were the ones that could say it, and we suddenly dumped billions of dollars of food on them.
So the wheat shipments was to keep their mouths busy chewing instead of talking.
Yep. No, I did a little booklet called Moondoggle, and I gave 55 reasons to not believe that we went to the moon. But it's very simple. You've seen the boot prints in the dust on the moon, right?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Have you ever walked on the sandy beach where the sand is dry? You don't leave a footprint. Now we have a moon, and oh, by the way, you can go into any laboratory that has a bell jar and a vacuum pump and put any kind of dust you want in there, talcum powder or anything else, and you pump out the air, and you drop a steel ball on it, and it will bounce without leaving a dent. You have to have some kind of atmosphere, not to have all dust settle into solids. So what kind of atmosphere did they have on the moon? There's no report of any, and there shouldn't be any.
Well,
and that's just that one little anomaly.
Recently,
as I say, I listed 55 good ones.
Last year, there was a satellite, an American satellite, that followed an Indian satellite the year before. But with the American satellite, at least, it was put in orbit around the moon at a altitude of 30 miles high, and it was taking pictures of the moon. And they did publish some photographs of what they said was the image of the orbital landing craft still on the lunar surface.
That's easy to Photoshop.
From your experience, what resolution or down to what size should those cameras be able to make an image? For example, we're told that American spy satellites can read the number plate or read a newspaper from 35,000 miles up. So
sure,
surely they should be able to pick out even a mouse-sized object on the moon from 30 miles up.
Well, we have a little problem of getting through the Van Allen belt. And as Van Allen himself said, nothing can get through that alive. And our astronauts in low Earth orbit, as soon as they get a little too high, they have flashes of light going through their brains, and they have to bring them down quickly. And there's no way to get anybody through there. And, of course, our moon vehicles were made of almost nothing. They were, you drop the wrench and it would go right through right through the floor. And of course, there's another thing too. And they have no airlock on the moon vehicle, so that every time they opened it, all of the air would immediately whiz out. And the only way they could change film in their cameras or anything else was to go back in and refill it with air and take their suits off and reload the cameras, because the cameras were fixed solidly with the suits. And they didn't have any tanks of air with them. So where'd they get all that air?
It's a mystery.
Also, there's a little matter of it being 260 degrees out there in the sunlight, and we were only there during the sunlight. So you had to have a good cooling system. So they had a water tank on their back. And what you do is you let the water out, and then this generates cold to cool the system. But it makes a spectacular display when you do that. And not one of the pictures shows anything like that. None of them. And so forth. As I say, I've got 55 darn good reasons. Also, the fellow that was in charge of computers and so forth for NASA was a fellow, a ham radio friend of mine. As a matter of fact, he has been thanking me for years for getting him to become an entrepreneur, and he became the top guy in the country for the government to turn to when they had any security problems.
Okay, can you just hold one moment there, Wayne? I'm having a bit of difficulty here. Hold it. Okay, so we got cut off there. I had to get back on. So we were just finishing up there about.
We were talking about the moon, taking the moon landings. Well, we had to do it at that time because we were in the war in Vietnam, and things were going badly, and they needed something to take the press and the media attention off the war for a while, and they did it.
So you believe?
But, anyway, this friend of mine was the head of information technology down there at NASA in the 70s, and he discovered this tape, and he put it on to see what was on it, and it was all of the video displays for the first moon landing. The only problem was they were all dated 7 months before the moon landing.
So to repeat that again now, you said that you had a friend who was working with NASA at the time.
Right. No, later, in the 70s.
In the 70s.
Right.
And he discovered that...
He discovered a tape which had all of the displays for the people, for the engineers, for the Apollo 11 trip, but they were all dated 7 months before the actual trip. And of course, we had a movie or video that Canada put together, What Happened on the Moon. And I have copies of that available in DVD for people. But it shows how that the moon landings were filmed by Stanley Kubrick on his sets for the 2001 moon, or the 2,000-year moon landings and so forth. And he had a small group of people that did it, and then they were given a lot of money to disappear. And later, our government got people to go around and find them and kill them. And this is all well documented. And I have copies of that video available.
Okay. Some years ago.
And then they finally killed Kubrick himself.
Some years ago, George Bush came out and he came out with a plan saying that he was going to put men back on the moon in a relatively short period of time. But 2 or 3 days later than that, the plan was amended to something like they weren't going to make a return to the moon till the year, like something like 2027.
Right. And we want to go on to Mars while we're at it. Why not?
Yes. So you're confident that we're not going to see an attempt to return to the moon?
We don't know how to get through the Van Allen belt. And as I said, Van Allen himself said nothing can get through that alive. And every animal that we set up into it comes back dead.
Now, is there a recording of Van Allen actually saying that?
I don't think so, but a good friend of mine was there and talked with him about it, and so forth.
Okay, well, I would believe that
this was the fellow who sent the rocks from Antarctica to NASA at that time. Sent 800 pounds of rocks from. He was down there for the geophysical year, and he sent 800 pounds of rocks to NASA. And these are the same rocks that later turned up as having come back from the moon.
Well, speaking of
his name is O'Keefe, and I've met and talked with him.
Last year, I was reading a report. I think it was the museum in Amsterdam who had been displaying NASA rock for something like 15 years. And on closer examination, they realized it wasn't a NASA rock at all, so they were highly embarrassed.
Exactly.
All right, well, going on back to try and solve the present problems here on Earth. You said the Federal Reserve System should be abolished, and the Treasury itself should issue their own debt-free money.
Exactly.
Would that be on the same sort of game plan as Lincoln when he introduced the greenbacks. We'll say Lincoln, when he was faced with the problem of paying for the war, he approached the English money merchants, and they were trying to charge him 29 to 35%, and he didn't want that. So he decided to issue his own currency, and later the English were given assistance to the South. How would the actual greenback system work if it was introduced today?
I don't know.
So they would just issue the currency without any, it would be a fiat currency without any backing whatsoever.
Well, I think they would have to take a look in Fort Knox and see what's there.
Okay, well, that hasn't been looked at since, I think, 1955, so there might be nothing
I
but
think it's been a while, and the last I heard, many of the gold bars that we had on storage were actually just gold-coated titanium.
Yes, I think it was Ethiopia that bought something like $300 million worth of gold, and when they got it home, they realized it was just, as you said, plated with titanium and worth nothing.
Right.
And the bigger problem is that the other governments that might realize the same thing, they cannot admit it, or otherwise their currency would collapse. So they're
Exactly.
sort of blackmailed into keeping their mouth shut. Oh, that's a bit of a problem. So I also see you have a solution to the illegal alien problems. You would just basically round them up and send them back home.
I think that's a good idea. Arizona's working on that with a fair degree of success because the illegal aliens are not only costing us hundreds of billions of dollars in welfare, and we're giving them, Social Security and hospital care and so forth, but also they're lowering everybody's wages. Everybody.
No.
When you take the lowest wages and lower them, that brings everybody's wages down. So let's send them back. And also, they're sending billions of dollars every month back to Mexico to their families. And let's have Mexico try to solve its own problems.
Well, it seems to be, as I said about the other problem, it seems to be a deliberate plan to make it easy for illegals to come to this country. They just don't want to secure the border. Or they don't want.
Exactly. The federal government is doing everything they can stop it, to stop preventing them.
Yes, after Arizona called their bluff, the federal government took them to court and actually prevented them from moving ahead.
Oh, Lordy. Well, I figure if we get started with health, and that'll totally revolutionize everything, the food and so forth, and we'll have more of an interest. If we're going to live 100 years or longer, we'll take more of an interest in what's going on. But when we're dying at 50, 60, and 70, well, big deal.
I see last Sunday night the food bill was passed in the Congress late night session.
Just love it.
So that'll set any sort of a sane food policy back by a generation, unless it's repealed in the next, which is unlikely, in the next session of Congress.
Right.
So it gives the FDA control to come in and decide what you may or may not sow in your backyard.
And I don't know how much you've read about the FDA, but there's some very good books on the subject of how they are bought and paid for totally.
Is that just coincidental, or I see some similar things happening in Europe with the Codus alimentarius, where they're making it they're outlawing people from getting supplements or vitamins.
Well, of course, they're doing things in other countries that we ought to emulate, like making it illegal to have fluoride in the water. There is no scientific evidence whatever that is beneficial, and lots of it showing how dangerous and how bad it is. It eats away the coatings of teeth and gives us bad teeth. There's no scientific proof that it is of any value to children, and it makes us docile. The you know,